Alright guys, so I thought today let's do a little bit of behind the scenes. Now I know a lot of you will remember that if you're following me on TikTok, you'll know that I am working on the Skyrim steel sword. And she's coming along really well. I got my quench tank set up right over there. A nice tall one with a lot of heat shielding around it. And the rough forge and rough grind, as you can see, is all done. That's just the oil that's catching on fire there. I was testing to make sure it was long enough. So now what I need to do to make sure that this is nice and true is I need to normalize it. And I thought we could talk a little bit about what normalizing is. I'm not doing anything here, I'm just moving it. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the forge going at a relatively low heat so that it will help me do so evenly, heat it up evenly, and then we'll be able to hang it, which is what I want to do, so that we can have a nice and even, straight, normalized blade. Because the more warps you get while you're normalizing, the more challenging it is. But the key to this is to keep it moving in the forge. Okay, so we're going to switch to a voiceover because the forge was a little bit louder than I anticipated. So, let's see if I can remember everything that I was saying. One of the notes that I want to make about doing this is to make sure that you forge it and you grind it a little thicker than you think is necessary, just until you really learn the material well, because that helps you avoid warps, not only in the normalizing for larger blades, but also warps in the quench. And there's a fine balance to be found, because if you leave it too thick, then you have a lot of work to do on hardened steel to grind it to its true shape. But get the profile all figured out, maybe a little bit bigger than you intend on the profile, but then you can work it down. Same thing with the thickness and the bevels. Keep it a little bit thick at first. Now, one of the things about normalizing is you need to keep the material moving, because here I went in so you can see it a little better. When you have a propane forge, the port will leave a little ring of different heat. You can see it right at the tip of the sword, right about there. So if you leave your material in there just laying flat, not only will it heat that area up unevenly compared to the other areas, but you'll also develop this ring of cool and then an outer ring of heat, which is not good for your material when you're trying to normalize it. So especially when you're normalizing it, keep the material moving back and forth, because that's just helping you really do a good job at keeping the heat even. Another point is, here I just shut the forge off. You can see, if you don't have a kiln, you can do a temporary heat soak that way. So the forge is off, but when you have a hot forge, so you've been using it for a little while, it retains that heat really, really well. So perhaps, if it helps you, let the interior of the forge heat up. That way you can do a heat soak, and it will help you keep your material heating up evenly. Even when you shut it off, you can use that to heat up areas that you're having a difficult time getting a uniform heat on it. So that's exactly what I did there, just to sort of display it. Now the tip of a blade, whether it's a large project or a smaller project, the tip will always heat up a lot faster because it tends to be a lot thinner. All of it comes to a point and the bevels are ground a lot thinner. So to counteract that, a lot of guys will actually, especially in smaller blades, turn the blade around and heat up the tang first, or the handle area first, and then once that's up to temperature, they'll flip it around and just keep it moving so that you can work on the tip of it, which is really important, because you can burn the material if you're not careful. And then two, the whole point of normalizing it is to bring the grain structure to an equal consistency throughout the whole material. Now at this point, we see that the steel is hitting a good temperature. It's probably around where we want it for our quench, but we're not doing the quench, and the core there is still a little cool. But for normalizing, we're going to want it a little bit hotter. So we'll keep it in the forge for a little bit longer, but for the purposes of the video, I'm just kind of trying to give you an idea of it. So another point is keep it as even as you can by alternating its direction. You see, I just flipped it. If I lay it flat, then you can develop a warp because of its weight. So I usually like to do it along the blade edge. And then every so often I like to flip it over to just try and keep it as uniform as I can, because the side that's up against the propane burner is not going to be evenly heated compared to the side that's up against the fire brick. So just move it around, figure out what works for you, and make sure that all you're doing, the key principle is maintaining a nice even heat without wrecking any part of your blade. Now what I'm going to do for this, guys, I'm actually going to give it a little bit of a heat soak. So you'll see me leave it in the forge a little bit there. But another good way to do it is once you're done heating it for normalization is to hang it. That will help prevent the blade from warping from its own weight while it's still hot. So rig up something in your shop so that you can hang the blade from the tang so that its own gravity helps maintain its shape, I guess. Prevents it from warping. Now again, here I'm just going to, for the purpose of the video, I'm going to do a little bit of a heat soak, which I personally like. It's not W2, which needs a lot of heat soaking. This is 5160, but it is heat temperamental, so I like to do a little bit of a heat soak. And I don't happen to have a kiln, so I got to work with it. It's a little uneven here, but I can work that out. So there's some points on normalization that I personally like, but I would like to also show you guys a little bit about how the fittings are going. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to come off of the voiceover, and then I'm going to go right back to the normal audio of the video. Here we go. On the fittings. Now, I cast this copper guard out of some old scrap copper, which is good and bad. It's nice I didn't have to pay anything, but there was crud in it, and so it's affected the purity on the outside a little bit. However, the whole piece seems pretty secure on the inside, so which is fine. I casted it big so that I'd have room to work down anyway, so there's going to be a lot of waste, but I'll try and saw off a lot of it so that I can throw it back in the foundry and re-melt it. I have a pilot hole drilled, and then I'll just Dremel and file it through. So there's the start of our guard, and here's our pommel. That hole is a little wonky, but that's fine because I have a lot of work to do to open it up. So that will be, yeah, this isn't true copper. It's actually called Nordic Gold. It's a combination, custom alloy, I guess you could say. It was actually used as currency back in the day for the Vikings, supposedly. I wasn't there, but that's what Wikipedia tells me. But it's got a cool look. It's going to be, it's mostly copper actually, so it's not true Nordic Gold, but it's going to have an extra little look to it, and I'm going to darken it so that it doesn't look so much in contrast to the rest of the color of the blade by the time I'm done. So now all I have to do is scribe out the engraving lines, and then I can take my Dremel and get to work. But there's a little behind the scenes for you about what's going on with the Skyrim Steel Sword. Let me know what you think. You guys have any questions about what I'm doing so far, or what I have planned to do on this completion of the completion of this project, so let me know, and I'll see if I can answer you. So thank you again, guys. Make sure you respond or you give me a comment about what it is you'd like to know, because I want to help you guys out. But until I hear from you specifically, I'm just going to keep on making videos that I think will be helpful. All right, thanks again, guys, and we'll see you next week.